on our 4 stations, AM 1470, FM 95.3, and FM 96.9, and further up the dial at 103.9 on the FM dial. You can also hear our show live as we stream it on our website at automaticlandlord.com. That's automaticlandlord.com. Just go to the top of the page. You can click on the Listen Live button and hear us live also at 8 p.m. each weekday evening. And you can also hear us in recorded form there on the same website at automaticlandlord.com. So we got a great show for you today, as we always do. We try to put together something special here for you. And we do this because we know not only are we broadcasting here in the South Florida local market, but also worldwide via the streaming on our website at Automatic Landlord, also on the iHeartRadio network, which is also heard wherever you have access to the internet or cell communication. You can download the free app and tune into the radio station at WWNN 1470 Money Talk Radio. So here we are. It's now a quick 6 days until Election Day. And as you know, on our Wednesday shows, we always like to put together a midweek report. And we got a lot of stuff that we can cover with you today. Our theme this week has been talking about landlords, the automatic landlord system. And we've been kind of touching from different perspectives. On Monday, we talked about the landlord system as a system. We talked about the financing of real estate using the automatic landlord, which we'll get into in more depth on Thursday. But we talked about the steps to take in the automatic landlord, starting with, from the buy. We got a little bit into that. We talked about the rehab, which is often the case when you buy properties at a discount. You're going to do some sort of minor or major rehab to get the properties ready for leasing. Then we go into the renting stage of the landlord process, and that's where I think you really start to see the separation when you start talking about how you position yourself, how you structure, and even how you improve. All of that goes in a very systematic way with the automatic landlord. And then once you've gotten that, then we talked about, well, now it's time, because now we have taken a property, probably doubled the equity, increased the value, positioned it for income, and now it's ready to be refinanced and then start the cycle over. And that cycle is what we were talking about yesterday, in order for you to build that cycle and incrementally build your real estate portfolio also. So that was our Tuesday show. And of course, as I mentioned on Wednesday, I said we'd be talking more landlord news. Now, you can't talk about landlording in today's environment without talking about the moratoriums and without talking about from both a renter's moratorium and a mortgage moratorium. And kind of interesting, and I didn't know whether you all were aware of this, but the National Association of Realtors, which of course has taken notice of what's going on, and believe it or not, is on the side of landlords. The National Association of Realtors is part of a 12 association coalition that wrote a letter to the top Democrat and Republican leaders in the House and Senate. The letter requests renter and landlord aid. Okay, so far we've always heard about the tenants aid. We've heard about the mortgage moratorium, which may help some landlords, but landlords that have properties that are not financed, or especially not conventionally financed, they're left out in the cold completely. So whether you talk about the CDC moratorium, which goes all the way till the end of the year, whether you talk about the CARES Act moratorium, which actually expired and then was extended by certain states. Some states did, some states extended it, but those even have already expired. and other states did not do that at all. So where do you stand? Where do you go? Well, if you want to get information, I've got a great article with the links to all of the resources that I'm going to talk about. If you want a copy of that article, then what you want to do is you want to text to my number, 561-861-2366, the word landlord. If you text the word landlord, I will send you that report. Again, the number is 561-861-2366, and just text the word landlord. And I'll know that you're looking for that report, and I'll give you sort of a compilation of the articles that I'm using in today's show. So that coalition of 12 real estate associations and councils wrote a letter to the two party leaders of both the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate, asking them to consider renter and landlord help in a new pandemic relief bill. And so it went to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. It went to House Majority Leader Speaker Nancy Pelosi. It went to the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, and to the House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. In the letter, the coalition told Congress that the latest eviction ban would ultimately harm the very people that it aims to help. It will be impossible for housing providers, particularly small owners, to meet the financial obligations and to continue to provide shelter to their residents. It adds also that it's going to saddle renters with an unmanageable amount of debt due to months of unpaid rent. And you know, I'll go farther to explain to these people, if they would just listen, that typically speaking, and over the years, I've seen this happen over and over, when the tenant becomes more than 3 months behind, the probability that they'll ever continue to stay, let alone pay, is between slim and zero. And why is that? Because it will make financial sense for them to just pick up and move, put down first, last, and security somewhere else, if they have to pay more than a few months rent, 2-3 months rent at where they're at. It's the sad truth of what it is. That's all I can tell you. And so this problem already exists, right? Because we are now, we had the March is when the pandemic was declared. The CARES Act came very quickly thereafter. So you can look at April, May, June, July, August, September, October now completed. So we're in our 7th and 8th month of the pandemic. And as a result of that, we now are seeing that they're way past the 3 months delinquent. So if they've been able to make partial payments, that's a good thing. If they've been able to make all the payments, even better. But if they haven't made payments since the beginning of the pandemic, well, I hate to give the bad news to the landlords. And like I said, this is where landlords out there, and you know, I have been giving this a lot of thought, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this very matter as well. Back in 2002, all the way through 2010, I used to run the Landlords Association here in South Florida. And it was an association specifically of landlords for landlords. And it was different than a lot of the real estate investment associations in that the majority of our members were existing landlords. Now, we opened it up, and if you wanted to become a landlord and you wanted to learn the ropes and get the inside scoop, network with the other landlords, well, we certainly welcomed those people in as well. But it was primarily for landlords. And then, of course, you know, in the real estate bubble of 2008, by the time 2010 came around, we were spending more time helping owners to defend themselves, that we just, the Landlords Association became, very poorly attended, and so it disbanded. And now more than ever, I've been approached by a number of people. I'd love to hear your comments and your thoughts, and you can do that again. You can send the word landlord. If you're a landlord and you'd be interested in this, text the word landlord to 561-861-2366. So before I jump over to the next article here on the midweek report that I want to talk about, I want to talk about the eviction moratorium, what we know about a declaration, and what about November 1 rent. And this is going to be important. We're going to touch on that when we come back from this break. You're listening to The Real Estate Show. My name is Eric Willner. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. I'm not hearing the music. I'm not sure whether they have it on or off. There it is. So an interesting article, and I don't know what I'll be able to get to that during the show, but it was a very interesting article that it wasn't, of all places, the New York Daily News. Now, New York is known for not being very landlord friendly. Texas, Florida, I would say are. New York, California, definitely not so much. And so the interesting thing is there was an article, actually, and the title of the article was "Landlords Are People Too," and it starts out by a bunch of quotes. Landlords are the devil incarnate. F the landlords, cancel rent, kill the landlords, landlords are a disease, and all sorts of inflammatory words that they were saying that are coming from the social media, from the quote unquote cancel people. And you hear them at the protests and in the riots, and it's become sort of routine in recent months. But there've even been some marches, but luckily they haven't really caught much traction. Talking about the rent strike movement, and talk about coming back here. And welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you are listening to The Real Estate Show, South Florida's #1 program about real estate, America's longest running daily radio show about real estate, heard on several local stations here in the South Florida area, nationwide on iHeartRadio, the TuneIn app. All you have to do is search for WWNN 1470 Money Talk Radio, or easier than anything, go to automaticlandlord.com. That's automaticlandlord.com, and go to the top of the page. You can click on the Listen Live button. You'll hear it crystal clear over the internet. And you can also download it. You can listen to some of our back issues. You can download any of our back issues going back almost 10 years of archives that are up there on our website. And you can also watch live or see the rebroadcast on our Facebook page simply by going to The Real Estate Show on our Facebook page. So just go to facebook.com/The Real Estate Show. No spaces, no hyphens, it'll take you right there. And going along on our conversation today about the automatic landlord, and of course, as I mentioned, you can't have much of a conversation without talking about the moratorium. And one way or another, this is going to resolve out. The problem is trying to determine how much damage is this really going to do at the end of the day. Now, a nationwide ban on evictions does exist right now, and it's going to last and through now pretty solidly through December 31st. So sorry for the bad news out there to my friends, the landlords, but it is a fact that that's what's going to happen. And even if you manage to get it in the court, it's going to be tough to get a sympathetic judge if you have a tenant that has been affected by COVID. Now, unfortunately, and because I'm very much in the mix of all of this thing, and I can tell you of several cases, even the case of a nurse who is not only not affected by the COVID, but who is benefiting in terms, well, I shouldn't say benefit, but is working extra hours because of COVID, and they feel that they want to join into this national moratorium. If they're not paying, why should I pay? Which is clearly not playing the game very fairly, and therefore will probably end up in that list of evicted tenants. And personally, I think rightly so, because like I said, these moratoriums are designed to aid people who are legitimately affected. Now, today, and to this point right now, there's going to be a lot of landlords that are going to not get the back lost rent in the past, yet they're still going to owe their mortgages and they're still going to owe their money because they're bound by a much stronger contract than it is. The other thing that's going to happen is landlords going forward are going to be much more careful and, in fact, probably much more selective, which will hurt many tenants that are trying to pick themselves back up, but they're not going to get rental properties, or at least they're not going to get first pick, and they're not going to get the best rental properties, because now landlords have to protect themselves in order to not get hurt by these contracts, leases that aren't protecting themselves so very well. So back to this article where it talks about how the U.S. is currently under national eviction moratorium that stops landlords from evicting tenants who don't pay rent at least until December 31st. And although the previous eviction on banning evictions was part of the CARES Act, that only covered certain properties, those that involve mortgages that are under federal programs. That moratorium expired, and the current moratorium effectively protects everyone living in one of the nation's roughly 43 million rental households, regardless of the kind of building that they live in. So it's really been a one-sided benefit. And here's what I think a lot of people don't understand. People often feel or think or imagine or believe that landlords are this rich group of people that sit around and smoke cigars and have oodles of money. The truth of the matter is that most landlords are mom and pop people who are trying to do a decent job of investing for their future, and therefore they will buy a second home, or maybe they lived in that home, moved out, were able to save up enough down payment for the next house, and figured it would be a good idea, which it is, to keep the previous house and rent it out as a future investment. And they live probably at the same standard of living roughly as most of the tenants as well. And so this concept that there's this huge financial gap between landlords and tenants is simply not true. And that's why there's this concern, and why I constantly am talking about this very, very subject. So that is something, is interesting. I was talking to the folks on our Facebook Live page that there was an interesting article in, of all places, the Daily News, where they were talking about how vilified landlords have been. And yet, even in the article, it talks about that that lessers who are regularly depicted in film and television as fat white slumlords who refuse to make repairs grumble about their boarders and rejoice over tossing them out into the street. That simply is, that's a cartoon characterization. The truth is quite the reverse. And the article goes on to say that most landlords are faithfully make repairs and do not want to evict. If vacancy means a unit must at minimum be repainted and remain empty until a new tenant is found, leaving the property owner with a loss of income for sometimes a month or months on end. So another article that I just wanted to share before we ran out of time is, on a little bit more positive note, because as I mentioned, this is a place where you want to come to talk about landlords, the automatic landlord, and what to do in the event that you either fall behind or are having trouble staying up with payments, and on this lopsided equation where tenants are not required and protected from paying, and now landlords are starting to receive calls from the mortgage company saying, hey guys, it's time for you to start making your payments. I've seen most of the lenders kind of hold off, and they're sort of holding off at the same time. But like I said, the big difference is that the landlords will be required to make up the back payments, even if they have to come up with a payment plan. The tenants, on the other hand, really there's not a lot of recourse against them, because what's the worst that could happen? You get a judgment against them, and then they continue to be tenants somewhere else, and it doesn't materially force them to make the payments the same way the landlords have to make the payments. So you got to have some strategies going forward for this, strategies for managing rental properties, and that's why we talk about the automatic landlord and the things that we've been teaching and talking about throughout this week. Again, before we wrap it up for today, I want to say that if you're a landlord out there and you want the free report that we talked about on the show about landlording, a list of all the resources of where landlords can get assistance when the tenants aren't paying. A lot of times I'm working with some landlords that, in cooperation, because there are organizations that do provide rent assistance, that requires the cooperation of both the landlord providing documentation of what wasn't paid and how much the rent is and so forth, and the tenant, who has to provide documentation of either the lack of the paycheck or what the reduced paycheck is, so that in conjunction they can get assistance, which ultimately will help both out. And which is, when I see that happening, I'm really happy, because it shows that they can work together for the long-term relationship. And certainly I, as a landlord, would welcome keeping a tenant like that over the one that I talked about earlier, that was just simply another Me Too person saying that if some of other people aren't paying, why should I? Anyway, we're up against the end of the radio show for today, but we'll be back again, same place, same time tomorrow. So until then, this is Eric Willner signing off of the Real Estate Show. Join us again tomorrow. Until then, drive safe, wash those hands, and make it a great day. Bye-bye. All right. There's I voted. Did you? Have a great night.